Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Minneapolis Pedestrian Advisory Full Committee meeting of April 6, 2022. Just to notice that members of the board may participate remotely by telephone or other electronic means due to the local public health emergency declared on March 16, 2020, pursuant to the provisions of Minnesota Statute Section 13D-021. Hi, everybody, and welcome. The first thing we'll do today is do the roll call, see who's here.
Okay, Aaron? Nope. Abigail?
Here.
Austin?
Here.
Barb?
I'm here.
Christopher Hoffer?
Here, but is anybody else getting a lot of echo? We're getting a weird echo, but I'm here, Millicent.
Okay, I have you. Christopher Ross? Harmony? Julia?
Here.
Matthew?
Here.
Neil? Oh, sorry, Neil won't be attending today. Paul St. Martin?
Here.
Peter?
Yeah, here.
Raina?
Here.
Here? Carrie? Jordan? Emma? Eric? Tom? Heidi?
Here.
Hi. Julie? Sarah Dunlap?
This is Sarah Dunlap. Yep.
All right. Ratana?
Present.
Present. Sonia? Millicent Flowers? I'm here. Doing a lot of clicking in the background. Chris Kartheiser?
Here.
Is there anyone else that is here that would like to be accounted for? Okay, we have 14 present.
Thanks, Millicent. That's 9 voting members, right? I got 9 plus 5, 14. Yeah, thank you.
7, 8, 9.
The mysterious caller from a 608 area code is Eric Bauer from the University of Minnesota. I'm just listening while I go for a walk outside today.
Okay,
Hi,
wonderful.
Eric.
Mark you down. We have 15 total.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I don't know what happened. I lost audio, but you're all back now for me. So great. Then up next, as usual on the agenda, is to accept the minutes from the last meeting of March 9th, 2022. So we'll do a roll call vote for PAC members. I guess I'll move the minutes first and foremost. Will anyone second the minutes? Thank you. As attached to the agenda for today. Now we'll do a roll call vote for approval.
Okay, Abigail?
Yes.
Austin?
Yes.
Barbara?
Yes.
Christopher?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Matthew?
Yes.
Paul, do you approve?
Yes.
The minutes? And Peter?
Yes.
Anna?
Yes.
We have 9 approved the minutes.
Thank you, Millicent. As always, appreciated. Great. So we're going to dive right into our reports, and then we do have quite a few discussion items coming up after that. But I think we don't have any resolutions to pass today, if I'm not mistaken. So these should be nice and short and sweet reports. Who would like to take it from infrastructure and engineering?
I'll jump in on that. There was one item on the docket. It was the 2nd Street South Improvement Project, specifically between 2nd Avenue South to 13th Avenue South. It was a 0% presentation by Dan Edgerton from Zan Associates. The scope of the project is the pavement rehabilitation, but to add ADA curb ramps and then evaluate options for bump outs, bikeway improvements, and spot intersection improvements. The scope will hopefully further the goals of the project, which are specifically including safety and mobility for all modes, creating an all ages and abilities bicycle facility, and accommodate access for residents, businesses, and visitors while maintaining traffic operations. The timeline for that is they're doing community outreach and design process right now. The design recommendation will be in July of 22, and then construction in the spring and summer of next year. The existing conditions are, if you know that area, basically a sidewalk, a striped bike lane, a through lane, and some parking on each side. And then at 10th and Park, there's additional, they've added some bollard medians like they have on, like on Lindale, for example, if you know that area. To further the goals, they're focusing, they want intersection improvements on Park 3, 10th and 11th, and then improve the protected bikeway, because right now it's just paint on the ground. They're talking about adding additional paint and delineator posts, perhaps a floating curb, but that was sometime in the distance. There are a number of bikeway connections that they want to improve, including 2nd, 3rd, 5th, Portland Park, 11th and 13th. Bicycles access and safety appear to be an important goal of this project. Having heard the presentation, the discussion included requesting that a common slate of proposed PAC improvements were put into the design and the project. That includes ADA ramps and crosswalks in all legs of intersections, including T intersections. The discussion regarding the use of potential use of textured paint in the project for additional delineation. There was also a suggestion of to definitely include wayfinding resources that are lacking. The U of M input was discussed because of or engagement needed due to the location of the project. And additionally, this has a separate budget from the pavement improvement and the ADA ramp improvements. It was unclear whether what the amount that was budgeted yet, but it was mentioned a couple times that the amount of the budget will factor into the extent of what can be undertaken. And I took that as it will not be a robust improvement, but we'll focus on things like paint and bollards for a cycleway rather than a protected bike lane. So that's it in a nutshell. Does anybody have any questions? Would you like me to expand on anything?
Yeah, Christopher, I'm taking Neil's place today and write minutes, and maybe in the minutes of the subcommittee, but would you go over the U of M component of that again?
Yeah, and I forget the gentleman that joined us on the phone today, but there was a U of M, I didn't catch his name, a U of M representative that suggested that the community outreach be certain to include the U of M due to the location of the project being close to the U.
This is Eric Bauer. I was the attendee at the subcommittee meeting and made that comment. My specific comment was that I just introduced myself, thanked him for his time, and noted that I'd be following up with him via email. The University of Minnesota does have adjacent property, and we do typically, when we have adjacent property to a city project like this, we do typically coordinate and reviewing the design, but also we have a different process for City of Minneapolis assessments as a public agency. So that's the basis of our coordination and outreach.
Terrific. Thank you for that clarification, Eric.
Yeah, and specifically, I mean, there is well, I won't wade into the details here, but it sounds like they'll be coming back to you at 30% or potentially 60%. Is that correct?
Yeah, 30%. This is just getting off the ground. They're at 0%, and they're just going to start their community outreach. So,
so the university might have a chance to put some comments in about what the scope looks like. There are some existing sidewalk gaps on 13th Avenue South that the project is very close to, if not already touching.
Thank you.
Now, Christopher, did you say the separate budget you mentioned, was that related to what might happen at the U of M?
No, it was these sort of what I would call safety improvements, including the bike lane improvements, the signage improvements, this kind of thing. That is in a separate budget from the bricks and mortar, the concrete, the resurfacing and ADA curb cuts.
Thank you. And sorry if this is in your minutes.
No, that's good clarification.
I've noticed that on the, just as an aside, there's a project in my neighborhood, this from the park board, that also has a set of improvements that they have designated as like if budget allows, which are, of course, those are in the, not in the car category or the lane category, they're in the bike and the pedestrian category. So it's that's not a trend or what have you.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked that the budget carves out these sort of they're not amenities, they're safety functions for pedestrians and cyclists. It seems like that would have to be the starting point of a project and in the larger budget, but that's for another discussion, I guess. So that concludes the report.
I have a question, actually, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Perhaps our university friend can answer this one. It's really just out of curiosity, or if it was discussed at your meeting. So when there are sidewalk gaps on university-owned property, who becomes responsible for filling those gaps? Is that something that the city of Minneapolis would be expected to do, or is that something you does, or is it partnership? Like, help me understand that if you can.
Regarding the that did not come up. I don't believe there was any discussion regarding sidewalk gaps on 13th. I did not know about them, so nothing's included in the minutes. So I cannot answer your question, Austin.
This is Eric from the university. I also cannot answer your question. We have a team in planning, space, and real estate who might be better prepared to address a question about how those things are handled. I perhaps waded into a detail. I was just sharing an observation. There is a sidewalk gap, and that's something that I at least intend to ask about. But this project is just getting off the ground. So.
Austin, this is Chris. I will say I don't know specifically with the U of M. There's a chance that that's different, but we did develop a sidewalk gap program specifically targeted at other institutional land uses, such as parks or cemeteries and things like that. It's kind of a different process. So we put aside funds specifically for those types of things. I can't answer for sure if that would be something that the U land would be included in, but it could be.
And to clarify, I'm pretty sure that the street jurisdiction for this project is all inside City of Minneapolis right of way. The university's adjacent property owner, but to my knowledge, the initial scoping of this project is not on university. It's a little bit different than the discussions we've had in the past about a MnDOT highway interchange and addressing gaps there.
All right, hearing no further questions, I guess, Abigail, that concludes the report.
Thanks, Christopher. Then up next on the agenda is the report from Programs and Policies.
All righty, that'll be me, Julia. So I think we've got just about everybody who's here was also in that meeting, so I'll go over this fairly quickly, mostly for some of our agency members. We talked a bit about the internal processes that happen within PNP and what we have brought forward, or systems we've tried to think about and implement, things like timelines that we are keeping track of when click is coming up, or new member recruitments, that we can be doing things without feeling like we're playing catch up. Some checklists that have been that we've worked with Chris and Matthew when he was here to pull together to help presenters know what kind of information we'll be looking for and to guide them in providing us presentations that help us give them the best feedback that we can share. We talked a little bit about that being some of the stuff that PNP can do that is self-motivated, is looking at processes, looking at onboarding, trying to figure out how to make the PAC function more smoothly and externalize some of the processes that may just be internal to people's memories or some of the staff knowledge that we don't always remember quite as well since we're not in it every single day. So that was that discussion, and just a reminder that we encourage people to, if they're noticing things where it seems like that stuff could be helpful, like that would be great to bring up for conversations. One of the ones that is recurring is a possible glossary for some of the terms and abbreviations that get used, and also just the reminder from Austin that also just saying those things and avoiding using jargon and acronyms as much as possible is helpful, since we do invite people, it's open to the public and we want it to be as accessible as possible to everybody. We talked a little bit about the annual report, which is coming up on April 21st. And since Abigail won't be in town and since it is in person, Neil will be the one presenting this. I think we're also talking about this a little later in this meeting. There's the reappointment information from Chris, which is that's coming up on April 15th, and reminder to Paul, Barb and Abigail, and then Neil is not here as the people who are needing to renew to stay on the committee. And we talked a little bit about the return to in-person meetings, what that might be like, and we got a little bit into some of the accessibility concerns that shift with in-person compared to remote, but most of this is governed at the state level as interpreted by the city clerk. So there's not necessarily a whole lot we can do. And that is also something that we're going to be talking about more in this meeting. So that's my very brief overview of what our meeting covered this month. And I'm happy to answer questions to the best of my ability, or else pass it back over to Abigail. Or to Peter, if there's anything that I'm missing, or any of you who are also present.
Thanks, Julia. I just wanted to bring up a previous month's meeting because we're going to follow on with the in-person council member meetings that could be Zoom or in person. We're working on that. The people are signing up. I think we'll work on that post presentation to our infrastructure committee of the city council. We can work out a talking points based on that. So,
awesome.
So we'll follow up on that.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
Great. Just to make sure no one has any questions or thoughts. I know some of those things we'll cover again in the discussion section. All right. Yes, so now we're on to discussion. These things seem a little disorderly. First and foremost, I'd love to introduce, if they're here, the new MnDOT member. So I'm going to take them a little out of order and do number 7 first. The new MnDOT member, if you're here, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Sarah Dunlap, and I work in MnDOT's Metro District for multimodal planning. I specifically work on ADA planning and policies and things like that. I'm new to MnDOT Metro. I've been with MnDOT for about 12 years, but new to the district, and I'm taking over for Mackenzie Turner Bargan. Anything else?
Thank you. No, yeah, thank you. We're so happy that you're here and that you're a new agency rep. Does anyone have any questions for Sarah?
I'm curious if there's any more you can share about the ADA focus of your work and where that might intersect with what we do. So we know what questions to bring towards you.
Sure. My role mostly is to listen to the conversation and listen to the projects and understand what MnDOT's role in those projects would be. I specifically look for in projects at curb ramps and sidewalks and accessible pedestrian signals and things like that. So, but again, those are things that are within MnDOT's right of way. So I can't answer to things that are on, the city or county lines, but for projects within MnDOT right of way, I can generally or ask point a direction to questions like that.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if that answered your question.
It helps clarify. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Well, thanks for letting us put you on the spot, and welcome.
Sure.
I hope to see you often in our meetings. Yeah.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome.
Welcome.
Great. So in welcoming our new MnDOT member, I'd love to start talking about, because the next thing that's happening under the discussions list is actually, I think Chris would have announcements about returning to in-person meetings. And so I'd love to discuss that. And then we can discuss what happens after that, which is when new PAC members will be coming and things will be turning over. So Chris, can you start sharing about returning to in-person meetings and the details?
Yeah, thanks, Abigail. Yeah, thank you. So we did get word from the clerk's office that we are going to be transitioning back to in-person meetings. The city council is actually doing that within a matter of a couple of weeks. So I believe the April 21st meeting will be in person, and they're still figuring out exactly what that means as far as regular, just general public attendance and how many people will be allowed and all that sort of stuff. But we know that the council and presenters will be in person for those. And the boards and commissions are all going back to in person as of May 2nd. So that means that next month's full meeting will be our first meeting back in person for the PAC, I believe. And we have the new office building conference room on the first floor of the new office building downtown, reserved for our full meetings. It's a nice big space, brand new, pretty large. So I think one thing we'll be wanting to talk about is like the setup that we're comfortable with and how far apart we space the chairs and how many tables we set up and all that sort of stuff. I haven't been in there myself, but I can take some time this month to get in there and scope things out beforehand. And then also another thing that we brought up is just the idea of how this committee wants to handle masking. The city does not have a masking policy in effect anymore. So I personally as staff can't force I can't force this committee to take any stance on that one way or the other. But that said, I've talked with, I think the exec committee about the potential to just kind of get this group together and talk about kind of the shared values around masking and policy for that. So I want to set the stage for that conversation, and maybe Abigail can step in after I'm done with this. But then just one last piece on the rooms. The subcommittees, as of now, we're planning to also have in the new office building, and those will be on the 4th floor in a conference room. And the 4th floor is where staff from my division is located, but there's a public space with public access rooms. So that's the plan for now. And yeah, Abigail, if you want to jump in, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify. So when you say transition back, as of May 2nd, we cannot even come in online. Like either you come to the meeting in person or you don't attend the meeting is what you're saying, correct? I just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Thank you. Yeah, we should be very clear on that. Yes, as of now, there is no option for any sort of split in-person and virtual meeting. It'll be entirely in person. And so even members of the public, if they wanted to come join, they would have to join by coming to the actual room itself, like we did before. The clerk's office is exploring if there are going to be new technologies or different ways of setting up the potential to be able to at least broadcast our meetings in the future so that people can attend more easily who aren't members, and can still kind of see what's going on and potentially even interact, but we don't have that ability now. And state law precludes the option of being able to have members be remote. So as of now, with that law in place, we are entirely in person for members.
Okay, thank you for the clarity. I also think you said an email will be going out to everyone who attends PAC meetings regularly, or all agency members, all PAC members, with this information, so that if anybody isn't here, they know that and that it's like solid. So just be looking forward for that email with information. As to that, I think we do want to kind of have a quick discussion about what kind of expectations we want to have, if we want to have any as the PAC. And again, we know the states and the city's rules, and it seems that there are really none. So we can set our own kind of expectations, but again, they're only expectations. We can't set any like hard and fast rules. So I think we can have that discussion. But so if you have any thoughts or ideas, you can raise your hands. And I see Julia, your hand went up first.
So not on that specifically, but on ventilation, that's, Chris, do you have any more information about what the ventilation is like?
The clerk's
Will
office,
you be scoping that out?
We had our regular meeting of all the staff of all the 57 boards and commissions today, and the clerk's office staff weren't aware of that. So I'll have to try and follow up with facilities to see if we have those numbers or not.
And Chris, this is Ratana, I can answer that. I asked that same question like last summer as staff about like the HVAC system, but the response I got was like everything's up to date and in terms of the ventilation, and there shouldn't, as staff, we shouldn't be concerned.
That's not super reassuring given what we've seen from CDC and Minnesota Department of Health. Do you know, either of you, I know that we're starting to see more push at the national level for actually addressing ventilation. So I'm assuming that might shift, like, to understand if the air is being recirculated, what kind of filters we're looking at, what the air exchange rate is, up to date without it being up to date specifically around COVID, and looking at airborne disease spread doesn't feel at all reassuring. But thank you for bringing that up, Tom.
All right, so thanks, Chris, for asking to see if you can get actual numbers beyond just up to date, and thanks, Ratana, for your info. Julie, did you have any other questions, or can I move on to the next hand?
Go for it.
Okay, thanks. Heidi?
Hi, thanks. I know at the council, we've probably been having very similar discussions relating to this with all of our committees. One thing I was curious about that I had just heard about for the first time today in one of our meetings. So we have a Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee where a certain number of members are required to be people with disabilities to represent disability community. And in their discussion today, at least that committee would have the option to request a reasonable accommodation under the ADA if they had health concerns, disability concerns that would affect their ability to participate in person. And so I was just curious if Minneapolis has had any discussions about that, because that's really kind of separate from the open meeting law issue, and it would not, the way it was explained to that committee, it would not be subject to that having to disclose a location at a non-public location stuff, because that would, it's just kind of different from the open meeting law consideration. And we have not had that discussion as far as it applying to other committees at the council, but if it's the ADA, it would apply to all of our committees, I would think. So we have more discussion to have, but I was just curious if that has come up at Minneapolis at all.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. It has come up. It actually came up at that same meeting today. And I know that the clerk's office is going to look into it and talk to both our public health and attorneys to kind of figure out what's possible there, and that our ADA specialist folks are involved in that conversation. But I don't have any, there haven't been any decisions or anything put forward aside from bringing that point forward, which I think is a really good point personally. And so I will continue to keep tabs on that. And I'll bring forward the fact that it's come up with the Met Council. I think that our folks would be interested to hear that as well.
Yeah, I'll throw a link in the chat with the recording of that meeting today, and I'm going to follow up with the staff person on that, just as far as application on some of our other committees. So let me know if I can be of any help making connections between our agencies.
Great, thanks, Heidi.
Thank you.
Great, thanks for the info. I see another hand went up. That's Julia again.
Yeah, I wasn't seeing other people. So if we're talking about the masks, I would love for us to be encouraging N95, and maybe if we can provide some for people who might have forgotten them. But I also do have some concerns around how those might make the meeting harder to hear, and what kind of things we can do around accommodations that can balance what we're disease spread versus people being able to hear one another. I know for myself that when we're at higher rates of COVID, I'm wearing a P100, which is fairly hard to hear through. But you know, if we're being forced to be in person during surges, like I am not. We know that females are, it appears, possibly 3 times more likely to get long COVID. So there's just some equity concerns around that, and then around how we accommodate, given that masks do introduce barriers that are not there with online meetings. And I don't know if that's something Chris might have insight, or others.
Yeah, good insight. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that. If it just
I'm
comes
gonna
down
have
to,
I'm gonna have plenty of insights post our first meeting, but I don't. Just have to go see what the facility, just in terms of the hearing question, right? As I get that, so I'm not. But anyway, yeah. No, I won't foreshadow anything. I'm looking forward to May. We'll see how it goes. So it's encouraging to hear Heidi's notes on, the possible, impact of a reasonable accommodation. Thank you.
I guess I'm wondering if I'm wearing a P100, and I'll just use myself as an example, since I've had a lot of practice in that at this point. I am fairly muffled, and it's hard for people to hear me. I assume that that's within the realm, like that, what leads to it might be different than in other situations, but what kind of accommodations would there be for heavier masking so that we can do that? Like, could I type up what I'm saying and we read it? What can we do if we're having our ability to communicate impacted, since we also know that we don't all necessarily communicate. I mean, I assume these things are in place for people who are deaf, or ways that we've worked to make sure things work for people with visual impairments. And I just am curious how we can proactively figure out what we need to have in place so that our meetings run smoothly, and so we're not making any of this a barrier to participation, or making people feel like they shouldn't be taking the steps they feel they need to, since we made this an individual issue instead of a public health issue.
yeah, good question. Chris, I know you're going to be visiting the room, Chris, at least the full committee room. Can you look to see if it's like wired for microphones, or like what the options are for like audio support, and then maybe report back?
I can say pretty confidently right now that there won't be like microphones right in front of each person. I don't believe that those conference rooms are set up for that. They are all video conference ready, but I don't know if that necessarily helps us, because the mics are all in the rooms, like on the ceiling, and it's meant to project to a computer to elsewhere. If that sound was then projected back into the room, my assumption is that it would feedback. And so I don't know that the video conferencing technology would necessarily help. It did come up today that the city does have some devices like that would be available on individual use to help with hearing, but I don't know that they'd be better necessarily than a given person's kind of personal hearing aid. But we could take that kind of individual action, and I'd be happy to work with anyone that comes forward to try and accommodate that to the best that we can.
That seems to be kind of, I'm curious about what we do if I'm extremely muffled or if
Right.
others are.
Peter.
Sorry,
I'll
Abigail.
just take that really quickly. Julia, I just want to be upfront. Like, this is not something that there's going to be like, I don't know. It's not necessarily going to be an easy transition. Like we're not gonna have every single piece of this figured out. Like, it is a new thing to go back to in person with masks. When we switched the reverse way to online, we were off for 3 months, and obviously that's not ideal. And we're working as fast as we can to handle these. And these are all good questions, but I can't promise that.
Yeah,
we'll
I
be
hear
able
that.
to have it set up in a way that like a muffled mask person is able to be heard by everyone. And I realize that's
yeah, and
less
that's
than
not,
ideal.
I don't think that's not a pandemic issue, aside from people have different abilities to speak in ways that are clearly articulated enough for others to understand. So I think the overarching issue is a broader accessibility one, not just for the pandemic, but it comes more into play in a pandemic. But thanks, Chris. I understand there's a lot to be juggling.
And like I said, the city does have those individual hearing aids that can be used for kind of the purposes pre-COVID that you were talking about, Abigail. But yeah, Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, number B is coming forward then, Chris. Yeah, the more I talk about it, I've kind of bounced around a few last meetings, but it's like, it doesn't sound like the greatest use of our time at a full meeting to figure this stuff out. If we can at all spend a half hour, an hour in person, just kind of seeing what the lay of the land is there, then I can not. So if you're saying someone come forward and we can spend some time and just kind of spend some time in that conference room, I can see what the accommodations are, if there's any technology hookups that work with or without my equipment. And if somebody wants to show up with an N100 mask and you can test that out too, that would be super cool. So.
Absolutely. And if you and or anyone else want to schedule some time with me to look at a conference room and do that before that first meeting, we can do that. Otherwise, if you want to show up early to the first meeting, more than happy to try and figure out as much as we can prior to.
Great.
Thank you.
Great, and yeah, my hand is up because I think Peter makes a good point. I think it'll come down, a lot of these questions will only be answered once we return in person. But one of the questions is, what we need to really cover is what will make us most comfortable so that the majority of us can return in person. Now, it does sound like that certain members of the committee would be most comfortable if everyone was wearing a mask, particularly a medical grade mask. Again, that can't be a rule, but it could be something that we as the PAC are considering, like we will just make it our best attempt to do. And then once we are in person and once in the room together, that can be a topic of discussion, getting through that first meeting, discussing any issues that come up with masking, any issues that come up with being present together, because the reality is we're going to be together in person and not online. So our only options are to just keep each other safe, but or not attend. So I do think it really will come down to making sure we schedule maybe a good half an hour on the next agenda to just almost to be like a welcome back meet and greet. Everyone can go around and say a thing or two, and then we can discuss, comfort level there. So I think that might be a good topic for the first item on the agenda for May. If that sounds good to people, feel free to raise your hand and comment on anything in there. Otherwise, I see Heidi, your hand is up.
I was just gonna say, actually, I might lower my hand and let people comment on this, because I think my comment is kind of more like, more looking forward, you know, if there are any changes about the open meeting law. So just let people comment and I'll put my hand back up later.
Okay, sounds good. I see Barb.
Yeah. My only comment is that I think that's a good idea. I just wanted to, excuse me, support you in that. We can't solve problems that we don't understand, and we won't really fully get them until we're there. And maybe we'll have more information about the ventilation. And I hope that would be the case, but if not, we'll just have to do what we need to do. And each person will have to take some responsibility for that. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. Hard to hear me.
No, thank you for that. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And so, good. I think it'll be a good plan. And then also a good chance to do a meet and greet. So our first meeting is just very casual. First back together is very casual.
Yeah.
Julia?
I think that sounds pretty good. And I'm speaking through a P100 right now just to illustrate that I would love to know what the accessibility options are that that we might be able to rely on if we need them. So I don't know if that's information that the clerk might have for us for that meeting. But yeah, and I can't wait to see everyone in person. I mean, I'm nervous about how it's going about, but I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you.
Thanks, Julia. Yeah, Chris, I think you're aware that you're gonna have to gather all that info and then bring it forward for when people.
Also, I mean, I can say pretty definitively that we don't have any other extra like technical devices. The clerks made that pretty clear. Like that's part of like why we can't do a split in-person virtual and hybrid and things like that. So for this first one, I don't necessarily expect more based on what I've heard from the clerk's office.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, hopefully it'll all get sorted after the first meeting in person kind of comes through and people kind of process it together. Does anyone have any last comments or questions or thoughts on this idea of returning to in-person? Peter?
I'm sorry, this is just for the minutes, Abigail. At the beginning, you mentioned a memo or email going out with additional information. Were you asking if that was going to happen, or are you saying that we can't expect that to happen?
I requested it from, yes.
That will happen. I will put all this in an email as well.
Thank you.
And I believe we'll send it to Gov Delivery as well, so that folks that get that also know that it'll be in person.
Thanks, Chris. Now Heidi, go ahead.
Okay, I guess, thank you. I guess this is a question for Chris. Again, just kind of curious, I know this is something I've asked internally at the council, and then also a St. Paul resident who's on a committee there. I know we're working with the realities of what the open meeting law is today, but laws can also change. And so I was just curious if there's been any discussion within the city as far as being heard at the legislature and giving feedback on, you know, how this has worked over the past 2 years and how this is affecting a wide range of committees, not just those with elected officials on them. I don't know that that's really clearly understood at the legislature. I know when I've asked this within the council, I've been told it's not part of our legislative agenda. I don't know if that's changed since I asked, but I was just curious if Minneapolis has had any conversations along that line.
I have raised that at our meetings with the clerk's office and other boards and commissions. It doesn't sound like it's currently a priority, but I'll continue to raise it because I think members on this committee and the BAC, I don't expect you all to stop raising it. And frankly, you know, we've all seen the benefits of expanding access through virtual. I also like the more we bring up the issues that we inevitably will face in person, there will be changes and there will be things that we need to work through. You know, the more we can kind of advocate that. So that was like the one update to the law based on COVID and the pandemic, and it was pretty sweeping. And you know, I would hope that the legislature would be willing to fine tune that, but I'm obviously can't promise anything. But yeah, I appreciate that comment, and we'll continue to raise that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heidi. Barb?
Yeah, hopefully it can be heard better. My question is, and Chris, I don't think you probably have the answer to this, but I don't fully understand why it was determined, was it across the board that all boards and advisory committees had to go back to in person? Or I don't understand why we all have to do the same thing. Is it just easier for the clerk's office, or what's the reasoning behind that? If we chose to stay remote, what would be the problem?
Yeah, it is actually in the state statute that all advisory committee, like basically all committees with the powers that we have that come from a city councilor. I'm not a lawyer and I don't know exactly how it's phrased, but our type of committee is expressly named in that. And so it's not the clerk's office decision. And that's my understanding, at least. And the reason that we've been allowed to be remote is because there's been an emergency order in place. And so the idea is that once that ends, then we'd be going back to in-person. The clerk's office has also, or the attorney's office has also said that because the city council decided to go back, that means that all the boards and commissions also need to, because they are essentially a part of the city council. And so that's why it's happening right now, even though technically we do still have an emergency order in effect.
Okay.
Again,
All right.
I'm not a lawyer, but that's my understanding of.
Yeah. Well, and I understood you. I mean, I know you're not a lawyer, and I also know that it's, part of the law. I just wasn't sure what the reasoning was, but that doesn't mean you know that, so that's good.
Here I am.
Hey.
Oh, what a cow!
Hi,
I made
Neil.
it. How are you?
Hey,
Welcome.
Whoops! Don't hang up.
We're talking about returning to in-person meetings. We just actually finished the conversation because they return May.
Okay.
The full meeting in May will be the first full meeting back in person. And everyone will be getting an email with all of the information about that soon from Chris. So,
Man, I can't wait.
Peter, yeah, right. I know people are kind of excited, I think.
I think so.
Peter, your hand's still up, or was that from before? Just want to make sure.
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, I'm happy Neil is here. Just to roll in a few things. So the last things on our agenda are the discussion about PAC member renewals and recruitment and executive committee roles for next term. Those kind of go hand in hand because it rolls over the beginning of July. And in addition to that, I just wanted to speak to the fact that I'm not in person in Minneapolis right now, and I won't be. So this kind of also ties to returning to in person. One, the presentation to the Public Works and Infrastructure Subcommittee of City Council, it used to be TPW, now it's PWI, will be happening April 21st. Chris, can you tell me what time that is?
I believe it's at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll send out an email with details. But on the April 21st at about 1 o'clock in person, because I won't be there, and much of the executive committee is also not readily available for the short timeline that we kind of had to create this. Presenting with the chair of the Bicycle Advisory Committee, Alyssa, will be our secretary, Neil.
Yay.
Yay. So Neil will be there in person. I think they're still figuring out the logistics of if attendees can appear in person, or maybe they'll be in a side room, or maybe they'll have to watch online. You can also always watch online. Chris, I think you and I just need to put our heads together and send an email out once we know if people can attend. The PAC usually always has a very strong in-person turnout when they were in person, which is always very fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, we were always like the biggest group. So, if only we could do that again this year. But anyway, that's April 21st. So mark that on your calendars in the afternoon. I know it's a work day. So thank you, Neil, for stepping in. And Neil, we have a lot of stuff coming and practice to do. So I'm excited.
That'll be fun.
And then that also includes the May meeting. I will not be in person. So I cannot run the May full committee meeting. Raina, I know that you said you've been you're likely available to be able to be at the May meeting to run it. I hope that's still the case.
It is. I can confirm.
Okay, awesome. So Raina will be running our May full meeting back in person, which will be awesome, and everybody gets to say hi to each other. And then I know, Raina, you will be gone potentially for the June in-person meeting, which that kind of leads me to another thing. So if Raina and I both can't run the June full committee meeting, we need somebody to run that. I know I have Christopher Hoffer on the docket if he needs to run it. But one option could also be if we discuss as a PAC, if there's any interest in executive committee roles for next term, because again, I'm just not in person enough in Minneapolis right now. I can't renew to be on the PAC because it doesn't feel right to like miss, you know, every other meeting, especially the next two. So I can't stay chair. So we need to talk about moving around the executive committee roles for next term. How many of people are still interested, what role you might be interested in. And that's a discussion that we can have today. And then potentially for the June meeting, if someone from the exec committee is, or if someone from the PAC is interested in maybe being the chair, they could maybe help run the June meeting as practice. Maybe they run it with Christopher Hoffer because you know he's run meetings before. That might just be a good opportunity. So that's a discussion that I think the executive committee or future executive committee might want to have. But I wanted to just open the door to talk a little bit about executive committee for next year, as well as member renewal and recruitment. And maybe Chris has some numbers on the number of applications we've gotten so far, and this and that. So that's kind of our next steps for the rest of this meeting, if anybody has anything. Christopher?
Yeah, Chris already said this, but Chris, could you remind me who is up for renewal? I just didn't quite catch all that.
Yes, Abigail, Christopher Ross and Donna Hemp, Paul St. Martin, Christopher Hoffer, and Barb Olson, and Baxter. Is there anyone that I listed that didn't think they were up, or vice versa? Anyone that I didn't list that thinks they're up? Just want to check and give a moment for questions if there are any. Peter, you've got your hand up. I don't know if that was before.
Do I still? It just so happens I do have a question. I just look at reviewing the membership today, you know, at LIMS or whatever. Donna Hemp's name is not listed, and there's one vacancy.
Correct. Technically, yeah. I just read Donna's, but so those were the names that previously held those seats. But Donna has already formally resigned from the PAC.
Okay.
Just to confirm, that's different than what we have on the minutes from PNP for who's up for renewing, where we have Paul, Neil, Barb, and Abigail on that, and this is a slightly different list. So I just want to confirm.
So at the subcommittee, I listed the folks who were there just to let them know so that I could talk to them directly.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Great.
Yep. And with the PAC, it's about half each time, so that's why the greater number.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm curious about that info on how many applications have been received.
I wasn't expecting that question, so I didn't look that up beforehand. Sorry if that's something that Matthew usually has for this. I'm usually not involved in this process, but I can get that for our next meeting update. It'll probably be closed by then, but I can look into that.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful to know. Yeah, because I think we want to discuss, like, if anybody on the PAC that isn't in an exec committee role that's interested in one, you know, this is a good opportunity to reach out to an exec committee member or to have that discussion, or if you feel bold enough to like chat about it now. I think this might be a good time to start marinating on it. I know we still have several months until the July elections. But it's a good opportunity to consider if you're interested in taking on a different role within the PAC. Christopher?
Yes, I just want to state that, I've spent this winter out of Minneapolis, and frankly, I hope to do the same next winter, which puts me in a position to the concerns that Abigail raised. It's been the silver lining for me is that these 4 meetings, or whatever, that I've been in California, I've been able to attend through Zoom. That will not exist anymore, and at some point it becomes missing a meeting and missing 4 is a different thing. So I just want to put that out there. I'm going to do some scheming and thinking and figuring, but I would guess as of right now that my inclination is not to renew, just because I'll be gone at least 4+ meetings. So, but that's something that, Chris, we talked a little bit about that a couple of weeks ago, but I just want to put that up. So, and for more focused, people are thinking about officer roles that would necessitate a need for another co-chair for engineering subcommittee. And I was hoping Aaron would be here because I'm keeping his seat warm because he was such a good co-chair. So we'll have to put a call into Aaron. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Julia?
2 things on that. The first is, Christopher, I hear what you're saying, and it also makes me think of, I don't know what your conditions are that California seem better than Minnesota at certain times of the year, but I'm assuming that it is similar to what Phil faced, and that our city is not accessible. And so there's a part of me that's like, well, if it's literally, if we have such an inaccessible city that people are leaving the state if they have that option in order to avoid our unmaintained, unusable transportation network, the fact that you're in California and Phil was, not able to reliably get from North Loop to City Hall using his wheelchair, there's a parallel there that I hope you're considering it seriously from that broader lens, and I respect whatever you choose, and I hope we all are considering what it means to have meetings where people can't attend because of the thing we're trying to fix. That said, I feel like I would love to just be back in person before I even have more thoughts on how exec committee and all of that goes. It's such a different field to do Zoom versus being in person, and maybe hopefully at our next meeting, we could maybe go over what have traditionally been the responsibilities of each role. And I know, Abigail, you won't be able to be there, but I don't know what we can do. Maybe if you can send out an email describing your experience as the person who's held this for a couple of years most recently, and your observations, like just the more information we have to be able to share internally, and then also with incoming members, hopefully before they even attend a first meeting, so that everyone knows what we're signing up for, when at least a lot of our returning members haven't had an in-person meeting too.
Yeah, those are good ideas, Julia. I think you're right. I think also too, in the orientation, Matthew usually gave a brief overview of like what each chair, vice chair, co-chairs, what each role kind of was. And then everybody had an opportunity to speak. So it might be a good idea maybe as the exec committee, when we put together the agenda for May, that should be another byline, is like exec committee roles and functions, so that people can kind of wrap their head around what those are. I think that's probably a really good idea.
We could also put it on PNP so that because that'll be our last recorded meeting, or our last definitely recorded meeting that would be accessible. So if whatever we do to kind of go over that in PNP is something that would be shareable with video of whoever can make it, describing what our view of each of these is.
That's a good idea. So the PNP April meeting, and then since you'll be covering that in the report in May, you could just kind of linger on that topic at the May full meeting. Mm-hmm. And like you said, people that are now kind of thinking about what's my role in the PAC, if I'm staying on the PAC, am I going to join the executive committee? They can kind of go back into person and also feel out the in-person aspect, because I think you're right, Julia, it'll really change kind of how everyone's, I don't know, feeling sentimentally about everything. So thanks for those. Does anyone else have any thoughts or questions on recruitment and renewals, or on the exec committee of any kind? Yes, Raina.
Just really quickly, and I know I said this at our exec meeting, Abigail, but I just want to say thank you. First of all, I'm absolutely devastated that you're not going to be the chair. And I've been kind of in a fantastic position as vice chair to just sort of sit back and learn a lot from you. So I just want to say thank you.
Oh, thanks.
I'll
Yeah.
second that.
Echoing that.
Thank you.
You're
Thanks, everybody.
irreplaceable, so we'll have to replace you anyway.
I promise when I'm in Minneapolis in July, August, that I will 100% be at a PAC meeting, or at the end of a PAC meeting, when, you know, if everybody feels good and there's outdoor seating somewhere, that we're all sitting outside together, enjoying a snack or a drink or something. So,
Did you want to say more about why you chose July, August to be back?
because you can walk down the sidewalk clearly, you know, obviously. So great. I think this is a lot of information. I know we get to talk about it because it's fun. We're going back in person. A lot comes with that, and then we're going to be, you know, a lot is going to be rolling over with the new appointments. So I think it's gearing up to kind of be an eventful next few months. I also think that on an agenda, maybe on P&P, we can discuss what does orientation look like. So what will the July meeting look like? I know over the last 2 years, Matthew and I have worked closely on making sure that there's like a more full orientation that kicks off the July meeting before there is the elections. Everyone gets to go around and introduce themselves. So maybe that's something that can go on the agenda as like kind of a planning stage process for new members when they join. I also know that I reached out to new members when they were appointed in gearing up for their first meeting. I'd love to hear if Raina or Austin or Matthew or Chris, if that like worked, if that worked well for you, or if there's anything you'd wish you'd had. And then we'll need to discuss, you know, making sure to send emails to the new members, Chris Kartheiser, when we have those names. So. Is there anything else regarding any of the topics under discussion, or can we move to announcements?
Just that we're going to have a really great P&P meeting from the sounds of it. So.
Yeah. Peter?
And so I guess it has to be a stated plan for me. Have we seen the last of you as this meeting, Abigail? Is that right?
No, because I'll be at the online INE and P&P meetings.
Okay. All right. Terrific.
And then I'll come find you in July at the July, maybe at the August full meeting is when I'll fully be back.
Thank you for
yeah, of course. Austin?
Hi. So I know we have a lot to decide for logistics for in-person meetings and all that stuff. Did we make a decision on if we're wearing masks as a committee indoors? I don't remember if we made a decision about that, and I just want to know if I should bring my N95 or not. Just if we could clarify that.
Yes, good question. What I was hearing was anyone who spoke up, it seems that more people will be comfortable if everyone was wearing one. So to bring it, and then I think during the meeting, the discussion can be had maybe more specifically around people's desires to maintain or loosen that policy, I think. Does that sound clear? Does that sound right to everybody? I just want to make sure, because I think we're kind of going with the person, as long as it's not a barrier for someone who wouldn't come. I wouldn't want anyone, you know, and I don't want to call anyone out to be like, well, I won't come if there's masks. But if anybody has a strong feeling, I'd rather that people feel the most welcome to come, and that just might be if everyone is masked. Julia?
This might be for later, but figuring out if we can be looking at wastewater, or if we set our own metrics so it isn't just mask, not mask. Maybe there's a way that we look at nuance within that, so that we ask people to mask 100% of the time in X context. But I do really like and appreciate the idea of encouraging more masking, especially I personally was not as aware as I wish I had been of how much people's movement who are immunocompromised or have young infants who are at risk for RSV have already been making choices of limiting themselves in public. So I really hope we continue to be masking more around one another as appropriate in the future so that we can increase participation, and more discussion about that going forward seems great, with default to masks for now, if possible.
Yeah, Christopher?
Yes, I'll be wearing a mask. I would request each of you to wear a mask, and I would request that we revisit this in the August meeting, having set an example for the new on-board members in July, that at least the culture is to wear a mask, and we can have a more, we can have a discussion down the road. And if there is something that comes up in the intervening, whatever that is, 3-4 months, then we can address it earlier. But my request is threefold. You can expect me to wear a mask. I request that you all wear a mask, and let's discuss it again in August.
100% agree.
Thank you both. Yeah, so it seems like, and that's the request. And again, that's not, we can't set down any rules, but we often run by consensus here at the PAC, and I think we all really respect and appreciate each other. So I think that's kind of where we've landed.
By the way,
Yes, Neil.
who's writing the minutes?
Peter.
Peter, lucky fellow. That's all I'm going to say.
Newfound respect for your efforts, Neil. That's a lot of work every month. No, I do appreciate it. So.
All over this.
Least I could do. How are you?
Doing well. I didn't tell everybody why I was late. I pulled a muscle in my left leg yesterday at noon, and it turned into a real thing. I went over just now to get a blood clot test, which apparently turned in negative. But that's what I was doing. So it was lots of fun. I love going to the university hospital. They're good people over there. Lots of fun. Even if you're dying of that awful disease, they make you feel like it's a wonderful journey.
Well, Neil, I hope you heal quickly.
In fact, this is a lot. I heard somebody at the U hospital today said, "No, you'll love dying of cancer. It's a lot of fun." My mom's really enjoyed it. No, just baloney.
So
they're terrific people over there. It's a great joint.
I think that's a really great segue towards announcements. If anybody has any other announcements that they'd like to share before we close.
No announcements?
Sounds like none.
Move to adjourn.
Well, move to adjourn. Second.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Great
you.
discussions today.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.